Well, I've got 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Steve Vos, and I'm a registered Maine guide. I also write for the Maine Sportsman. I'm the Washington County writer, and also do the wildlife quizzes, and I also write some specialty columns for them every once in a while on a variety of subjects, from moose hunting to snowmobile riding to ATVing. I maintain a website here. It's currently down right now because I don't pay my bills. I've had it for about 10 years, so I'm hoping they'll give it back to me sometime. But everything that I've ever written, I think I topped out last year, wrote my 100th article last year. I'm up to about 125 now. Lots of information on there. I'm going to try to post the videos for this advanced presentation as well as the basic ones. I'll put them up on YouTube and then put a link on the blog. So you don't feel like you have to write anything down. I'm hoping to have everything up as long as the technology works for me today. I'm also on Twitter. I have an Instagram site that hosts all my photos. That's up there as well. And if you have any questions after the presentation, you got anything that you'd like to share, feel free to drop me an email. So with that, I'll go ahead and get the presentation started. This presentation today, I was asked last year, because my basic presentation had so many people in it, if I would go ahead and also do an advanced game camera presentation this year. And so I kind of combined the presentations just a little bit because I figured there'd be some people in this class who also hadn't received the basic training in game camera usage. So you're going to see, if you've been to my basic one, you're going to see a few slides that are similar. Just bear with me as we go through those because I want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. What I'm trying to do with this presentation, the last presentation, the basic one, kind of helps you select your first game camera, how to operate your game camera, how to mount it effectively so that you actually start seeing animals on it. I don't really, in that presentation, talk much about deer hunting in particular. I kind of talk a little bit about using it on bait sites for coyotes and bear. I talk a little bit about deer hunting. I use it for getting kids interested in the outdoors. But today's presentation, this advanced one, is going to concentrate purely pretty much on deer hunting. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So first of all, we're going to talk about the modern day camera. They're really amazing pieces of technology. Cameras today can hold thousands and thousands of photos. They can host hours of video. They're really amazing compared to where we were 10 years ago. And all the latest technology, everything that I'm moving toward, is all remote access and control. So all the new cameras that are coming out, you actually can control them directly through your smartphone. They download the photos in the field from miles, hundreds of miles away, directly to your phone. And this is really the way to go, especially for deer hunting, so you're not constantly disturbing the sites. And I really like them. I'm going to be picking one up this year. So I start my other presentation with this because I kind of like to show you that game cameras really do make a difference. Here's a picture of a turkey. A couple days later, there's that same turkey. Here's a bear. Of course, there's the bear. Here's a deer. There's that deer. There's a moose. And there's a moose. Even on the moose hunt, we took the cameras. And it's just simply because so we can monitor what's coming through, what times. And that's really the key part about using cameras, is you can really maximize your time. I have two little guys, 8 and 10 years old, and I like to spend a lot of time with them. And I don't want to waste my time out in the field if I know there's not going to be something walking in front of my deer stand. So I set my cameras. I know that deer are coming through at set times, and when they're not coming through, I don't bother to go sit in the stand. Is there a chance a deer could wander through at that time? Sure. But pretty much deer are creatures of habit. Especially if they're not in an area where they're not disturbed, and they do tend to walk through at roughly the same times. So obviously game cameras work. So let's talk a little bit about costs. I always try to tell people you need to balance your costs from what you're trying to get. You can get game cameras now for anywhere from about 60 bucks. They do make cheaper ones, and I will tell you, you do get what you pay for. I wouldn't go any cheaper than the ones that you see here, about that $60 range. I prefer to buy the $99 cameras. They simply have faster trigger speeds and detection zones. And we talked about this in the basic class, but basically all cameras have a detection zone, an area where when an animal walks in front of it, that's where the picture is taken. How long when an animal walks in front and it actually takes the picture, that's called your trigger speed. Better cameras have faster trigger speeds and larger detection zones. A nice $99 camera will fit for most of your purposes. And just to kind of show you, this is what the quality of a photo that a $99 camera will take. And you can see, nice photo. That's a good daytime photo. I mean, you can very clearly see number of points, You know what time, you obviously have your date and time stamps. It does just about everything you're going to want it to do. This is a $500 camera. Okay, so 5 times the cost. You see a whole lot of picture quality difference there? Not a whole lot. Here's a night photo with, again, that $99 camera. It's in the exact same spot. You can see that that looks like about a 4-pointer coming through. So I can tell what time the deer are coming through and how big they are. That's all I really care about. So I don't need a $500 camera to do that. A really basic, budget-conscious camera will do the work. And you can see, $500 camera, you do pick up a little bit more detail, especially at night. But again, how much detail do you need to get an idea of the deer that are coming through and how large they are? So this is that whole quality versus quantity. So having multiple cameras obviously allows for a larger area coverage. If you have one $500 camera or one $500 camera or $500 cameras, you can go ahead and spread those out obviously in 5 times the number of locations. So you can scout in all these different locations without having to continually move cameras. It's really tough. Once you get a couple good locations, if you got to start moving cameras around, things get confusing. I like to be able to put a camera in a location and leave it there. So I like to have a lot of different cameras at my disposal. If you have not yet had a camera stolen, you probably will. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who like to take them. Some of the new cameras actually have locks on them, so you have to actually enter a passcode for the camera to work. But if somebody steals it, it's gone. It doesn't matter if it has a passcode or not. They may not be able to use your camera, but you're not going to be using it either. So conscious cameras, if they're stolen, they're a lot easier on the wallet. If it breaks, if you have a camera and it's under really hard use and you're leaving it out all year long, if it lasts 5 years, I'd be surprised. They just don't take the wear and tear of the Maine winters and everything that the weather has to throw at them for an extended period of time. That's just kind of the way it is. So if you have a $500 camera and it breaks after a year, you're probably going to be pretty upset. But if you have a $50 camera and it breaks after a year, probably you could take that a little easier. One of the things I do is if I am going to buy a camera, I always buy them at LL Bean. LL Bean has a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you're not satisfied with that product, hope nobody here works for LL Bean, but that tends to work pretty well. If I have a camera and it lasts 6 months, I'll take it back. If it lasts for 2 years, I feel as though I was satisfied with the product. Money can be saved on other things. So I'm going to show you, and as you probably know, if you've used the cameras for a little bit, there's lots of other things that you can buy to go with the cameras that make their use a lot easier. You can buy extra SD cards. I recommend having 2 for every single camera, so that when you go to check a camera, it's simply a matter of putting the cards in and out. I also make sure everything is labeled. You got camera 1 that goes with SD card 1 and then SD card 1A, so you don't get them confused. You know exactly which ones go to which cameras. And when you go back and you actually start putting these on a map where each one of your camera locations are, you know that they're all numbered and labeled and there's no confusion. So you've probably heard this quote before: 10% of the hunters shoot 90% of the deer. Why? Scouting, 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 all the time. I like to start my scouting now. I've already got cameras out, and I'll continue right straight through the deer hunting season, even if I shoot a buck, because I like to watch where the deer are going, what deer are coming through. So it's scouting, scouting, scouting all the time. And I have a number of cameras. I have about 8. I've heard that other people have a lot more. This guy over here has he's thinking about upgrading to about 20 cameras this year, because we're pretty passionate about using them and knowing how effective they really are. So scout smart. So obviously you can't kill deer where there are no deer. So just because you're putting a camera out in the woods doesn't mean that you're going to see deer on it immediately. You have to go where the deer are. So if you check out a property and you're not seeing deer sign on it, move on. Find an area that actually has deer sign. Then go ahead and start putting up your cameras. And I'm going to talk about where you should put up the cameras. And one of the things that will help you determine that is looking at an area's topography using like Google Earth. You can use the Maine Gazetteer, it doesn't really matter, but you have to have a good idea of what that property looks like, because deer are going to move in all kinds of different locations, but if you have ways of pushing them into certain areas, it's easier to get a picture of them. So here's what I call the hunter's dream. Everybody has probably looked at Sports Afield or Outdoor Life, and you open it up and it has this picture-perfect picture of coyote hunting. This is how a coyote reacts when it goes across the field, or deer hunting, or camera placement. So this is what I call the hunter's dream, right? So here's a food source, and here's your bedding area, and there's one trail. It's called the primary trail that the deer walk. And as long as you put your camera on that and figure out what time that deer is coming through, you just put your stand, in this little pinch point down here, and you shoot your deer, right? That's how it always works every year, right? Now, okay, so this is what I call reality. There's all kinds of trails. Sometimes the deer walk the ridge and they get into the apple orchard. Sometimes instead of coming down the pond, they take a left instead of a right. Sometimes they do follow the primary trail. Sometimes they do go to the bedding area here. Sometimes they go out here, or maybe on the other side of the flowage. But one thing you do notice in this that isn't going to change, this pinch point right here, which is about 200 yards across. So the deer almost always at some point are walking through there. Come on right in if you like. It won't bother me any. So they are coming through there at some point. So natural landforms like a pond, a flowage, a ridge line, those are things that are going to congregate and make the deer move through a property in a certain way. And this is what you want to look for when you go ahead and decide to set cameras. Now, if you're aggressive, you want to throw everything at them. So that means when you find an area like this and you look at things like bedding areas, food, natural and man-made, travel corridors, water, staging areas, you want to really put cameras out there in all those locations to find out what's going on. And this is what I mean. So those little blue boxes are cameras. So got a camera up on the food plot or up in the apple orchard, got a camera down on the ridge, got one on this spot right here because the deer are walking down and they're taking a left or a right, so I want to figure out where they are. This area right here, if a deer walks down around the edge and I only have a camera here, I'm not going to be able to see them. But if you stagger your cameras and they're about 50 yards apart, each looking one way, of course that's north, and I'll talk a little bit about why, you can go ahead and shut down an area so they can't get through without being monitored. And then, of course, over here, I've set up a bunch of, these are either natural or man-made scrapes to be able to lure them out of the bedding areas during certain times of the day to see if they'll come out and check those out. Now, after you figure out where they're firing and what time those deer are coming through, then you can design a hunting plan to figure out how to hunt each one of those areas. The deer I shot this year, I was noticing it was coming through, hugging the pond about every 2 to 3 days. He was coming through and triggering this camera. I have a stand right here, and I said, well, it's going to come through about every 2 or 3 days in the evening, right around, right at dusk. And so I went out about the third day, and he walked out. I missed him the first time, as far as he came out and he didn't come a whole way through. He smelled me or something happened. But the second time, pow, done. So when and where to place cameras. So obviously location is king. You want them to naturally walk through an area. And if you can do that, great. But there's also other ways that you can lure them in front of the camera lens. And we're going to talk a little bit about this depending on the season. So May through August, you can scout, obviously. You can use natural as well as man-made food sources. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. September, October, we're going to use natural food sources. Of course, during hunting season, baiting is illegal. And then in November, when the rut is on, man-made natural scrapes work really well. And then in November, December, again, natural food sources. Obviously, in any one of these seasons, topography is king. Location, location, location. You got to be where the deer are. So I want to make sure I'm clear on man-made food sources and what I mean by that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. These are extremely effective. If you want to know all the deer that are on a property, go ahead and throw some corn out or salt block or some protein pellets, and every single deer that's in that location will walk in front of that camera. But you can only use it obviously during pre-season. So law and placements of bait, if you look at page 13 of the State of Maine Summary of Laws and Rules, states baiting for deer during any open season on deer is prohibited. So even if, the way that I read this law is even if you're in an area that is outside of an expanded archery zone. Expanded archery starts right this year, I think it's September 10th. Yeah, I put it on there, September 10th. So you have to shut down all your bait sites on or before September 10th, or before September 10th, because that's an open season on deer. So this means that bait can be used to photograph and collect information on deer activity from about mid-December when black powder season stops roughly the beginning of September when expanded season opens. Now, a lot of people will tell you not to bait deer during the winter because it changes their patterns and everything else, and I don't. I don't feed them during the winter, but I do give them supplemental feed during the spring, which is now. So for antler growth, for helping them through a rough winter, great time to go out and provide a little bit more feed. They're moving out of their their sheltered areas. They're moving across the country a little bit more. They're getting out, and they're really searching for food hard at this point. And some of the most popular ones, like I said, corn, protein pellets, mineral blocks, and then there's a lot of different specialty deer mixes that can be considerably more expensive to have, all of the kind of mixed ingredients together, molasses and those types of things. And this is the kind of photo you can get when you obviously put bait out. They all congregate together, and this is 2/8 and 2/4, and you can see the size of this deer. Nice healthy deer. So that's man-made food sources. Let's talk about natural food sources as well. These are the ones that we tend to use during early season archery and expanded archery. And those can include food plots you can set out your own, apple orchards, gardens, cornfields. Now, one of the things I always say is a lot of people will set up a camera over a food plot, and they'll take some nice pictures of deer moving in and out, but then they go ahead and they put their stand right on the field or on the food plot, and that gets really tough, especially if you're archery hunting, because you've got 40 yards. So if a deer is walking out at the bottom end of the field, great, and your camera is capturing him in the field, but you don't know where and what time he's coming in and from what direction, so you got entry and exit patterns coming in and out of that field, and that's really what you got to figure out. So what I like to do is I like to be able to mount my camera in a nice high location, so I got a great photo of the entire field or food plot or whatever it happens to be, and then I set it in what's called food plot mode. So basically what it does is the camera takes a photo about every minute in that last critical hour when the sun is starting to set or when the sun is rising in the morning, and it just takes photos of the whole field, pow, 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 about every minute. You can set it minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want. And what that does is it allows you to extend the camera's trail range. So this is the regular range of a camera. So typically a deer would have to walk right straight through here in order to trigger that camera. But in a large field, that's probably not going to happen. So when you put it into this plot camera mode, it will actually take pictures of this entire area. So anything that's in here feeding, it will take its photo. And again, we'll do that during that critical hour, that twilight time. And here's an example of that. So here's a deer that was photographed using this plot mode. So typically that deer would have had to walk right in front of this camera for that to go off. And you can see that the shadows are starting to get a little long here. It's getting near the end of the day, and this deer walked right into the field. Now what you want to find out is, especially if you're archery hunting, is where did he come into that field? Did he come in this way? Did he walk down the field? Did he come in from here? And then you can find the trails. And then what I like to do is once you find out where he's coming into the field, especially if he's coming in later in the evening, like right after dusk, is you want to start tracking him back on these trails using cameras to figure out at what point, as you track back, is he coming into this field or is he coming through this area during daylight? Because that's obviously what we want to figure out, a time when you can actually harvest that. So we talked a little bit about man-made scrapes. So if you've never made a scrape before, it's not rocket science. It's pretty easy. You just have to be really careful with human contamination. So if you're going to be doing it, don't use the rake that's been sitting in your garage, next to the oil can or the gas can, or make sure you're wearing rubber gloves and those types of things. So rubber boots, just real basic stuff. So to make a scrape, you basically just have to rake grass under a tree branch, and there's some rough calculations here, and then activate it with deer urine. Some people they've done studies to actually use human urine. I don't tend to, but I hear it works just as fine. And you want to try and establish multiple scrapes. So you notice that you can do that around a bedding area. It's really kind of fun. Last year when I was doing it, I got some great photos, and it's kind of neat to see them working it, especially if you put the camera in video mode. It's kind of neat to see what they do when they come in and they check out a scrape. So it's something to definitely try. Now, just for an experiment, I wanted to show you guys this. I did this on purpose last year in front of a camera because I thought you'd find it interesting. I just sprayed this log with just urine. not my urine, deer urine, just to see what would happen. I was just curious. So I got this 8-pointer that came in, sniffing all around, just curious. Now this isn't even a scrape, this is just spraying urine on the ground, okay? He came in, he had to check it all out, thought it was kind of neat. Had these deer come in. It's just a mama with a couple babies, and they were sniffing it and taking a look at it, pawing it, just interested, you know. So you can see that if you have a camera, even if it's set up in a weird location, you're having trouble getting deer, you may get just a deer head, or you're just getting a deer butt as it walks by. If you go in front of that camera and just scruff up the ground and spray a little urine or do something like that, you can stop that deer most of the time right in front of that camera and get a pretty good shot. So this is what I was telling you is king, is hunting these natural funnels and land formations. And you can kind of see an idea of this. Here's a ridge with a low point. And deer, you know, they like to travel on trails. They like to go over low points rather than, you know, actually crawl over a mountain or anything like that. They're just like us. They want to conserve energy. They have to eat and put out a certain amount of energy, and there has to be a balance there. And the way that they create that balance is by kind of taking it easy, making sure that they're not overexerting themselves. So, you know, landforms, use them to your advantage, and there's all kinds of different ones. And if you're finding that you need to monitor, obviously, a larger area, like I mentioned before, lots of people monitor trails and those types of things. Again, you look at your camera and figure out what its capabilities are. Almost all the new cameras now have that plot mode capability. But it's not, on all the cameras, it's not called plot mode, so you kind of have to look at this, and I know this is going to kill everybody in here, but you have to read the instructions. I know, I don't like to read them either. It's hurtful, yes, I don't like to read them either. Have your kids do it, that's what I do. And so again, you know, using those natural landforms, so ridges and looking at all this, you know, pinch points, finding out where they're bedding and then setting up ambush sites around them. And so that's, you know, primarily what you're trying to do. And this is helpful. When you're setting a camera up on a trail, lots of people like to, you know, you have a trail going by and they set the camera looking straight back at the trail. But notice how big, and this is your detection zone, is here, as opposed to here if you set the camera at a 45-degree angle to the trail. So as the deer comes through, there's a larger amount of time that is in that detection zone, and you'll be able to capture them a little easier. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you get a lot of butts, okay, deer butts. And that's because the deer are walking by and the trigger speed on the camera is low, so when it walks into the detection zone, it's not triggering fast enough. And sometimes with budget cameras, it does take a few seconds. Again, there's all kinds of little tricks you can do. I mentioned the, you know, scruff up the ground, or you can spray a little urine. Those types of things will stop them, and at least you'll get a photo to be able to tell if it has a rack or not. So, in the basic class, I talked a lot about putting that camera at about waist level. And if you read a lot of the instruction manuals and those types of things, that's what most of the companies will recommend. It's because they're easy to check, right? If it's at waist level, you come in, you check your camera. There's a kind of a change in how people are using cameras, and they're all going higher and higher. But there are obviously some difficulties with that, especially if you want to go and check a camera. So if you go higher, why would you go higher? Well, number one, the deer don't see it as easy. And if you're using even an IR camera, which is infrared, they glow red. And if you look at your pictures, when those cameras glow red, those deer are looking right at that camera every time. They do see it, and it spooks them. So take them up higher, and you don't have to worry about that. Also, some of the more expensive cameras are using what's called blackout technology. They don't make any light at all. No light is emitted when they go off, even at night. Those are also great for security, because I use my cameras when I'm not hunting with them, or if I go away on vacation or something. I take all my cameras and I put them around the house, and they monitor the house while I'm gone. So I'm using them for dual purpose. So there's a couple things you can do. If you put up a camera, you could actually just put the camera up as high as you can reach. So put the camera up as high as you can reach, or get something small to step on and be able to get it up about, if you can get them up to about 8 feet, that's out of most people's visual range. So thieves aren't going to see it at 8 feet. They're going to walk right by them, especially if you use any level of camouflage. And I do recommend camouflaging your cameras. It doesn't take much. You just have to break up their silhouette. They're boxy, and they sit on the tree, and there's that band that goes around them. And if you look at a camera on a tree, what's the first thing you usually see? dot. The box, because it's up against a tree. Like, never put a black camera on a white birch, right? Also the band that goes around that tree. You can see that quick. So I've started eliminating the bands. I actually have screw-ins that I use now to mount the cameras to. And if you do mount a camera up high and you don't have one of these brackets, which I'm going to show you a picture of, you can actually take a stick and put it behind the camera to angle that camera down so that you're actually looking back down on the trail or wherever you happen to have it mounted. And the new cameras, not only do they allow you to have your photos from that camera sent directly to your smartphone, but you can also, some of these new cameras, you can go over to them, and with your smartphone, you just have to get in proximity to the camera, close to it, and it's Wi-Fi enabled, so it immediately downloads everything to your smartphone. So if you've got a camera that's up, 10, 15 feet in a tree, or you've got it at your camp and it's remotely monitoring for security, you can actually just go to that camera, get close to it, and it'll immediately download everything to the camera. They have another camera that's kind of neat. It has a box that you can hide anywhere, and 5 cameras can talk to the box, and all they do is send photos to the box. So you just go to the box and collect the photos. You don't have to go to the other 5 cameras. And I think the range on them is like 100 yards each or something like that. So for security, if you want them at your house and somebody steals your camera, they think, ha ha ha, I got your camera. You say, ha ha ha, I got you on all the photos of you taking it. So there's some really neat products out there. And so if you are going to up your game, if you want to start putting these cameras up a little higher, there's some neat ways you could do it. You could haul a step ladder into the woods if you wanted to. But they also make these, these are just what you use to go up and climb up into a deer stand. So you use your steps that you may be using anyway for dual purpose. And when you go around, you check them. You should only be checking your cameras, about every 6 weeks to a month. You should be checking them every day. You should leave them out there, let them do their thing, collect the data, and then go out and grab it when you get a chance. But no sooner than at least a month. And these steps work great for being able to get up higher, to get access to them. And these are what I was telling you about. They just screw into the tree, and then they're real nice because then you can just adjust the camera to exactly the angle that you want, rather than try to get up there, strap it onto the tree, which is hard when you're on a ladder, and then trying to then put a stick behind it to get just that right angle. So you get the stick in there, and then you go, oh, that's not going to be enough. I'm going to have to go get another stick. And these are really easy, and I think the cheap ones are about $12. But be careful, if you get the cheap ones, they tend to rust pretty quick. So spend a little bit more money is sometimes worth it for those. And so here's a picture of somebody putting a camera up in a tree and trying to get a nice picture of this food plot. However, I probably would have tried to go back a little bit further so I can really see where those deer are coming in and out of that field. This is a pretty good shot, but you could see if you move that camera just a little bit further back and put it a little bit higher, you could get additional coverage over the entire field. And here's what I was showing you. If you start seeing pictures of your deer looking like this, you probably should adjust your cameras and either put them up higher or go to that blackout technology like I was telling you. Over and over and over again, deer like this, this isn't helping you.
Can you get that blackout technology in the $99 camera?
Yeah, they almost all of them will come with that now. Yeah. I don't think the cheaper $60 one. I think that still uses IR, but the $99 one that I have uses that blackout technology. Yeah, it's so cheap. 5 years ago, blackout technology cameras were like $250 because I still have one of the old ones because I loved it. I'm like, this is the way to go. I can see already. I use the cameras a lot for coyote baits. Just monitoring, figuring out where the coyotes are coming in. And as soon as they see that IR go off, you'll never see them again. They're gone. They won't ever come back in on bait sites. So the blackout is great for just about everything. Even on bear baits, if you guys use IR on bear baits, those bears will look back at your camera, and then the next shot you're going to see, if you ever find the camera again, is that bear tearing that thing off and then hauling it down through the woods. They don't like IR either. So I always say there's 2 types of people: those who've had the camera stolen, those who will. It's unfortunately something we have to deal with. It's just the way it is. So there's all kinds of things online on how to keep people from stealing your cameras. Some really neat stuff. I won't go into all of it, but this camera right here, all they did was they went and collected a bunch of leaves and just debris from the forest floor, and then put it in a bag and kind of crushed it up with a hammer. And then they covered the entire camera with epoxy, and of course sealed up the flash and the other areas with I think it was like painter's tape. And then they simply rolled the camera in it, and just a real simple way of being able to completely camouflage those cameras. I've seen people take and just like a camera that you know is going to go on like a white birch or something like that, because I mean, after a few years, you're probably going to mount your cameras in roughly the same locations. You're going to get an idea of the topography of your area, and then the only thing you'll probably do is add more cameras. So if you know one camera always is mounted on a white birch, yeah, take some birch and just glue it right on around your camera. Like I said, it's just about breaking up that outline of the camera and also making it the color of the surroundings that you're putting it in. And just by doing a few simple things like that, you can really deter thieves.
I lost 4 this year.
Yeah. So I've said this before, I want to say it again. Scent control is really important. You don't understand how important until you start taking photos, and you try it sometime. Try a little experiment. Go out and don't be as cautious, and see for the next week or until the next rainstorm how many deer are coming in front of that camera, and what do they look like when they go by. Set your camera on video mode. Are they sketchy when they go by? Are they kind of really nervous looking around? It's interesting. So I always wear rubber boots, wear rubber gloves, scent-free clothing, just like I would if I was going out hunting. No scent spray on the cameras. I try to always check during inclement weather. If I know there's going to be a great big rainstorm coming in, I'll go out and grab the cameras, even if it's been only 3 weeks. I know, ooh, big rainstorm coming out, grab the cameras, check them. I always do it during midday. Remember, deer are evening and morning creatures, so if you go out during the middle of the day, it's less likely that you're going to spook them. And I said no sooner than 2 weeks. And also how you approach the camera. So just like you would when you're going into your tree stand, wind in your face, you want to walk as quietly as possible. You don't want to be making a ton of noise talking on your cell phone, doing those types of things. And avoid when you come in touching the vegetation. I know I'm one of those people that when I'm walking down a trail, I'm always snapping twigs, right? Because it's trail maintenance. I try not to do that when I'm going in and actually checking the cameras. If you can, check your camera via a vehicle or an ATV. Drive as closely to the camera as possible. Vehicles and ATVs don't bother deer as much as human contact will. I know it sounds funny, but even when you're going out, and I do a fair amount of trapping, if I'm going to check a coyote trap, I would drive right up to it and look at it rather than walk up to it. It doesn't bother them as bad.
Another thing with the cameras, I always approach mine from behind, so I'm not disrupting the area.
Yes, the detection zone. Yes, right. Great idea. One thing you'll notice with budget cameras, if you have a chance to buy a camera on eBay and you're going to pay $30 for it, it's probably an older camera, it's probably going to use great big C-cell batteries. You're going to spend more money on putting batteries through that thing. You might as well buy a brand new camera and just spend your money there. The new cameras with, you put 8 AA lithium batteries in it, it's going to last your entire season. You won't ever have to put another battery in that likely. I'm actually moving more toward having these 6-volt battery packs. Because these things will go almost a year with a camera, especially if you're not setting your cameras to go off every 3 shots every minute. If you're only shooting 1 shot and then and then the camera shuts down and takes another shot a half an hour later, the camera's going to last a long time with just a limited amount of battery power. If you have one of those old cameras, I would get rid of it. Go with the new stuff. You'll be really, really surprised. The technology also advances so fast that if you have a camera more than 5 or 6 years, you probably want to start updating and getting newer ones. These battery backups are cool. Moultrie makes a product that's actually a solar power unit that also has a battery attached or part of it. So it's all one unit and it's plug and play. It just plugs right into the bottom of your camera. So you can mount the solar panel and the camera up nice and high. And let's say you also are using the Moultrie product that allows all your information to be sent to your smartphone. You could leave that camera up there forever and never have to touch it again. That's the technology that we have available. The camera would constantly run because of your battery power. The solar charger would continually recharge the battery. And the photos, you would never have to check because they're always going to be just sent right to your smartphone. So very, very cool setups that are possible. So I'm moving more toward this cellular and wireless because it's so much easier. You can monitor. And the way that it works, obviously, is it just sends the pictures directly to your smartphone. There's different plans that are fairly economical, down as low as about $10 a month. And they'll just send the photos directly to you. You never have to go back into the woods again if you don't want to until hunting season. And especially if you're monitoring property like your backyard, and you can walk out and check your cameras, that's one thing. But if you've got a camera that's 3 miles in the woods, or it's if you have a bear bait site that you're using and it's a 2-hour drive away, it may be easier to remotely monitor those areas. They are still a little bit pricey. The Moultrie unit that hooks into the camera is $200. The neat thing about that Moultrie unit that's kind of broken away from the other models that some of the other camera companies are using is that that particular unit will work with any of the Moultrie cameras. So you can actually, if your camera breaks or you want to upgrade to a new camera that's maybe a little bit more expensive, you can actually just unplug it, plug that unit into it, and it will still continue to stream your photos. So the other camera companies, it's all one package. So if the camera goes, so does your transmitter unit. And this is just an example. This is
brand new batteries in it, but if I get out and check it and then put it back up, it would flash like the next day. It would go back to the same time for some reason.
That's frustrating.
I went online and found an internal battery that keeps track of the time, so it keeps it.
And it's tough too because see, all the cameras, water is the camera's worst enemy, so they're all sealed. So you can't even get in to work on them if you want to. Like to try to take that apart and then replace that, you can't even do it. Most of the time, they break, they're disposable at this point. You have to.
I had trouble with ants getting into mine, and I put dryer sheets in, just a little piece of dryer sheet in it.
I had that happen once.
Not a problem.
Yeah. The one thing I do, I have to be real careful of, I've done this actually a couple times, is you go out to check your camera, and it's got that swing door with the seal. You pull your memory card, you put the new memory card in, you get busy doing something else, and you forget to shut that door, and then you don't go and check it for a month. Rain and wind, and it just destroys them. So it's tough. You got to make sure that you when you go out there, you put your new memory card in, you seal them up, and then the other thing that's really frustrating that I've done a couple times is forget to reset the date and time. So you go out and you check it, and it's November, and you go out and you get your camera, and you're all excited to see what time those deer are coming through, and you pull the memory card and you look at it, and it says July. Because now you don't know any date. I see people smiling. That's happened. I think it's happened to everybody. You know, sometimes those cameras shut down. You know, you change the batteries, you put the batteries out, and then it resets everything. And then you forget to go in and actually change the date and time, and then you go and you collect it a month later, and you get all these great deer pictures, but you don't have any idea what times they were coming through. I mean, you can guess, you can look at the shadows and stuff, which is when you get desperate. That's what I do. But you'd rather not.
I think, like he just said, I had a camera that brand new batteries. It said there was a blue light on it, and it said low battery. They were all brand new batteries. I took all the batteries out of it, and I let the camera set for 3 or 4 weeks, a month and a half, 2 months, put batteries back in it. Works fine. That's one I was telling you about that I just took off my driveway. It works fine after that, for some reason.
I've had, sometimes they'll shut down if they get any moisture in them. Like even if you go out and you take your camera out and it's freezing cold, and then you bring it into the house, what's going to happen? Condensation. You shouldn't be using that camera until it's able to come all up to room temperature. And sometimes you can get moisture in those, and they'll shut down. It's a safety feature. And what I've done before with other things, cell phones that get wet and all that, you put them in a big bag of rice, and the rice is so dry that it actually sucks all the moisture back out. So sometimes if you have a camera like that, if they dry out, they can start working again.
Have you had any experience with the new Exodus cameras?
No. What are those? Are they expensive? Because
No, under $200.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's just 2 guys that started a camera company, and they're not advertising, they're not endorsed, they're not sponsoring anything.
Yeah.
They're trying to. The case is completely aluminum.
Oh,
It's a 5-year warranty. You get 50% of your money back if they're stolen.
really? Shoot, that's a heck of a deal.
Yeah.
Some of the reason that if you read the websites with people making their own trail cameras is because they're so sick and tired of the ones that you buy off the shelf that last a year. So there's lots of people who've decided, well, instead of just getting one that's terrible, I'm going to make my own and make it better. And it sounds like these guys are the same kind of have the same kind of idea.
Yeah, mostly advertising on social media and stuff, but not You know, they said that, you know, saving money everywhere they can to keep the price of the product down.
What makes it?
Exodus.
I take my cameras out when it gets cold. I used to use them to monitor my coyote bait sites, and if I did that, I would go out on a night I knew it was going to be really cold, and I'd pull them. I've lost cameras before. I show a picture in the basic presentation of me pulling a camera. It's the last picture the camera took, and I'm kneeling down in front of the camera picking it up, and it records that the temperature is 117 degrees because it was 17 below, and it died. The LCD and it cracked and it just died. So it's, if you leave them out, they will. You left yours out all year long, but I think if you leave them out, from what I've seen, if you leave them out multiple years in a row, it's hard on them. The weather's really tough on them.
I've got cameras out right now.
Yeah, yeah.
He has a camera he's had for about 5 years. We took it in this year, changed the battery out, he has it over food, so he's getting a lot of pictures,
Yep.
and it was, always took great pictures. Changed the battery out, and now when it takes a picture, you're only getting about this much of the screen.
It's only on the top, so I'm not seeing what anything. It's just like a random color every time. I'll get like one, like, I think it's because like the game is off or something.
Did it get dropped when the lens moved?
I don't know, like.
Because if the lens goes below the housing, it could be doing that. It could have moisture in it. You could try drying it out. You know, just put it in, pack it in some rice. That could potentially be it. Yeah, birthday.
Dad, take care.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, you know, the cameras are so economical nowadays, and they get so much better every single time. I mean, they're better with battery life. They're better with picture quality. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. You know, it's almost worth going out and buying a couple every single year, and then rotating your other ones out. And when you have an old camera that dies or something happens to it, keep it. Put it on a tree, someplace where somebody can see it, and then take your other camera and put it up high, looking down at it, and see who walks by, and maybe takes a look at your camera or tries to take your camera.
I actually got an illegal hunter on my camera this year too.
Really? Came through in out of season.
Yeah, he was in season. He just didn't have the proper orange and stuff on, and was carrying a rifle. And
Huh. I got a picture last year. I on the edging of that pond. IF&W came through, a biologist doing fishery research.
Yep.
And I thought that was kind of neat. I was like, wow. He just walked right by it. Didn't have any idea.
The other picture I got was in February of 2 dogs and a guy that was out looking for antlers.
Oh, shed hunting.
Yeah,
Huh.
they walked right by my camera.
Didn't have any idea.
No.
No. You'll see all kinds of weird stuff. If you put them out long enough, you'll get all kinds of animals doing funny things, people walking by. And
I got pictures of dogs chasing deer.
Really?
And I turned them into the animal control officer and the warden, and they tracked the dogs down.
Really? Huh. Yeah, I use them all over my property. It's nice to be able to monitor who's coming in and out and what's going on. Any other questions? Well, great. Well, make sure you quickly sign, get a piece of paper there, put your name down. We'll do a quick draw.
Thanks for the info, that's.
Yes, no problem.
Your son's out there.